And you're welcome back to the second half of today's Under Center podcast. Dara here with you. Fionn and Reen have had to step out for this part, but I'm not alone because I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Collins. You may know him from his YouTube channel, Alex Collins NFL. Alex, it's great to speak to you. How are you?
Doing well, man. I know you guys you're a little later over there, and you're a little bit of a night owl right now. So I appreciate you uh s- creating a little bit of time at the night, and I'm ready to talk about football, man. I'm fired up that we're connecting, and that even with you all the way over there at the middle of the night, we're gonna chop it up.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm just getting my body ready for the late nights when the league starts again. So I'm just, I'm getting ready for the season just as much as the players are. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, no, I've been in Europe before and trying to watch the Sunday night football games or Monday night. It is not fun at all, and
Yeah.
impossible in some ways if you got something to do the next day. So I salute you. I know you got your Seahawks coming up Monday night, so we'll see. I hope the body is ready by then.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Look, Alex. I would say I am a big fan of your YouTube channel. I've been watching now for a little bit of time, and I'm delighted now that we were able to get you on the show for the chat itself. We're heading into the season here now, and obviously there's a whole new batch of draft class coming into the league too and stuff. And like, is this a particularly exciting time for you to see all these practice tape and to see like how players are either veteran players are adjusting to new teams and draftees coming into the league adjusting to the pace of NFL?
Oh, definitely. I'm such a nerd, honestly, about all this stuff, and even just I love the all 22 angle, which I use for my videos, of course. But just trying to parse through, seeing these reporters take these little videos and trying to get these little snippets of whether it's man, whether it's zone, what kind of concepts teams are running. I love that kind of stuff. I put some of that stuff on my Twitter when I can, and yeah, I mean, you can feel the excitement in the air. I'm a big fantasy guy. I know you are too, and getting that going, it's just everything is just bubbling up in this incredibly exciting way, and I can't wait. I think it's going to be a fantastic year, and yeah, I'm unbelievably excited, honestly.
Yeah. Now, the one part we do have to get through is, of course, those pesky preseason games. They make us sit through it so that we can really appreciate when the actual regular season begins. And do you sort of look at those games in depth to see, concept or offensive or defensive concepts that you may see obviously brought into the regular season, obviously with different personnel?
Yeah, it's very challenging. It's a really good question. I think you have to take a little bit of a kind of a deeper, more laid back view at the games and not over evaluate everything. If you do see some things, that's not necessarily a guarantee that those will keep popping up during the season. I think one thing I look for is just the temperament of some of the guys. I think it's important to kind of feel out whether or not they're comfortable in this setting, or if things are a little overwhelming. If you're a quarterback and you get a free runner, not necessarily what his stats are against the blitz or against pressure, but just how is he reacting in those situations. I think that's what I try and look for a little bit more. uh, the NFL, I just got access to all 22 for the first time for preseason last year, so it was a little bit of an adjustment process of just trying to figure out how much importance to put on it. Um, but yeah, looking at Trey Lance, for example, last year, I was trying to feel out how much of what I'm watching in these preseason games is going to be important, and I think it can be challenging for sure, but it's definitely an important tool. And we see some guys pop off in the preseason who are nobodies, and then suddenly within the year, within the next few years, they become big time names. So I think it's a valuable tool, but it's challenging for sure.
Yeah, and Trey is a perfect example because we do see obviously each team's own personal social media account, hype up the big plays from any sort of training session, and
Not
that's the
Tua's though necessarily.
No, not to us. No, not that's very true. You know, he throws a pass to Tyreek, and everyone just criticizes that it was a noodle ball for you know. But like there was a couple of videos of Trey last year, you know, after he'd been drafted by the 49ers, and being obviously we mentioned off air, like being a Seahawks fan, like you do pay attention to other teams in your division, and you see the hype that other fans get. And something is that's something that you try to look at as well, sort of with a level head too, saying, yeah, okay, he has thrown this, 60 yards, bomb to let's just say Debo Samuel, for example. And then, but you sort of thinking in your head, okay, but what other plays has he messed up on that has been intercepted? That he hasn't actually gone through his progressions, hasn't done the right sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really easy. That kind of reminds me of your question of just pro days when we're watching these college guys. I think it's so easy to get enamored with the big throw or just one on one. Almost everybody in the NFL can complete just about every pass. I think I did a video on Tua a couple months ago, and I was very critical of him, but he can still throw the ball 65 yards where he wants to. I think where the issue comes forward is that it's just a matter of consistency. So even seeing one play on Twitter or a reporter tweeting a play or something, it's well, A, there isn't necessarily it's not necessarily a live rep with guys trying to take his head off. But B, it's how many of those plays can you make? It's not can you make the one play? All these guys are so good. So I think it's really the NFL, especially a quarterback, comes down to consistency. And so I'm never really overvaluing these clips, to be honest with you. And I think once the live bullets are flying, somewhat of preseason, as we talked about, but that's where I'll really start to say, okay, is this is this something to monitor right now? But I think the clips for preseason, more so on Twitter and whatnot, are just to see, okay, maybe Saquon's playing in the slot more, things like that, where you can say, okay, I'm starting to see a different range of outcomes for this player. I think that's more what we can get out of preseason training camp and then preseason. It's kind of there's a term in fantasy. It's a slow drum beat for maybe you'll hear about a player slowly starting to get more reps and then he's starting to play in more positions or the snap count's going up or he's kind of becoming the featured back if he's a running back. And I think that's kind of the same in terms of how we can monitor these stories going from training camp to preseason into the season. It's kind of a slow drum beat that gets louder and louder, and these stories really start to crystallize as time goes on.
Oh, yeah, and let's actually move over to sort of your own YouTube channel itself, because um, what got you interested in starting up the a YouTube channel, breaking down all of this game tape in the first place?
Yeah, so a long time ago in like 2016, I did this thing called Scouting Academy, which is put on by Dan Hatman, who is an ex NFL executive, and it introduced me to the All 22 game film. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, I implore you to go check it out. You can just Google it. NFL Game Pass has the best product, but also a shoddy product, but that's for another discussion. Um, but it really just blew my mind watching that angle. It zooms out, it shows all 22 players. Whenever I'm explaining kind of what I do to people who aren't familiar with it, just talk about how on the broadcast you can't see the safeties. The play starts, the receivers, most of them run off the screen. And the context of what those guys are doing is unbelievably critical to what is happening on the field to a point where you almost really can't tell, and then hopefully the broadcast shows a replay or something. So in 2016, that my mind was just blown. I didn't realize how much of the context of just a game that we're missing. I started watching Brett Coleman, who most likely a lot of you are familiar with, who's also a film breakdown expert, and he actually kind of helped me get my start, which was really special and incredible of him. And I would just developed a really strong passion for the game. I think all the lingo is fascinating. I think all the strategy is just so interesting. And I just learned as much as I can with playbooks and online resources and just bouncing questions off of coaches on Twitter. And yeah, then I started doing it full time in 2019, and it did well enough that I've been doing it full time for a while now. So I'm incredibly passionate. I'm a fan, and I really love making the content, and I love that people feel like they learned something from it.
And you mentioned there that you moved to full time in 2019. At what point did you realize then, or was there a certain video that you uploaded that did quite well that you thought, right, okay, there's I've got something here. There's potential here to sort of make this take a career path down this way.
Yeah, so it's a pretty crazy story, honestly. I decided I was going to try and cover a team to try and gain a fan base because I was almost starting from nothing. And I decided to choose, I was going to follow the Rams. This was after the Rams Patriots Super Bowl. And I was thinking, okay, Sean McVay, Jared Goff, these guys are fascinating. And I was going to work with a blog to try and put out videos and then have the blog also post the videos and hopefully gain a little more traction that way. And there was just kind of this weird miscommunication with the guy who owned the blog. And so I grew up in Oakland, and I decided to pivot to the Niners, who were just coming off their 2-14 season. And I said, okay, Kyle Shanahan, he's really interesting too. They're local, I'll do them. And that was the Super Bowl year. And in week 3, I posted a video uh, called "The 49ers Offense Devastates Defenses," something like that. And it did really, really well in terms of viewership. And that's when I kind of knew I had something. So it was a great stroke of luck, and it happened relatively quickly, which was, I think, definitely helpful for my heart for sure.
Yeah, I'm perfect, and it's been great that you've never had to sort of look back since, and you've been able to sort of keep going forward with the videos as well. And obviously with some of the videos, we wanted to ask your opinion on some of the um stories heading into this current NFL season, and probably the best place to start with is, I'd say, probably the biggest move of the offseason, and that, of course, was Russell Wilson moving to the Broncos. And the question is, and this is again coming from a Seahawks fan point of view, so you're going to tell me that he's going to be awful, but I know we both know that that's not true. Um, with him coming into an environment in Denver where he's with like the total opposite in terms of head coach, where he was with the experienced Pete Carroll, he's going into now with a rookie head coach in Nathaniel Hackett. Do you think he's going to be able to impose his game or his play style more on the Broncos rather than maybe the Broncos sort of, setting up an offensive scheme that he has to work around?
Yeah, definitely. I made a video recently about him, and it became clear watching, especially last year and then just years in the past for a long time, for his whole career really. the he runs the Seahawks have just really run one offense with him. He's so brilliant, but at the same time he's so limited in what I think is this really fascinating way where over time these different offenses with Schottenheimer or their new coordinator last year is escaping me, Waldron.
Yeah.
These offenses just kind of melt into this same basic structure where Russ ends up running the same sort of concepts. He pretty much ignores the middle of the field, runs a ton of play action, loves throwing bombs outside, loves to run around and extend the play. And over time in these different offenses, they end up just kind of being that same style over time. So there was recently a quote from Nathaniel Hackett, and I know a lot of coaches say this. It's not necessarily some sort of bombshell that Hackett's dropping on us, but he said this is going to be the Russell Wilson offense, and I really believe that. I think we can project pretty cleanly some of his offensive weapons. I think Sutton is his DK Metcalf. I think Jerry Jeudy, maybe KJ Hamler will be his Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks have always, of course, been a very run-heavy team, and with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon and the Broncos now, I think those guys are arguably, well, I guess I won't put them above Marshawn, of course, that's sacrilege, but that's a very strong tandem. Javonte could explode as a lot of people are projecting him potentially to do. So I do think that I think Hackett's just going to watch what Russ has always done, build it around him. I don't think he's going to try and force him to do things that he's not comfortable with. I'm a fan of some of the stuff that PFF does, Pro Football Focus, and they have these great graphs where they show where a quarterback targets compared to the league average. And the blue is where he doesn't target as much compared to league average. Red is where he targets more. And it's pretty much, I kind of likened it to a bald man, basically, where the hair on the sides is where Russ throws to nonstop, and then everything in the middle is blue. And that's just always been the Russ offense. And it kind of sounds like a bad thing. And I think some people took my video to be sort of negative, that he can only run this one style of offense. But this is a potential Hall of Fame quarterback. This is a guy who has mastered this style of offense. I think sometimes we see some of the shortcomings in the playoffs. I think that's where this style of offense does have those hangups, where there isn't as much success with how much the Seahawks have been going to the playoffs. So I think from a ceiling perspective, it is kind of a bad thing because Russ and this offense do have limitations, but it will be an incredibly fun offense to watch. It'll be super productive. There might be a week or two at the beginning. Well, I mean, I won't say that because they're playing the Seahawks defense, so I think they'll be pretty all right week one.
It's
if
a
you know what I
sleeper
mean
defense,
there,
Alex.
it's a sleeper defense. It's a sleeper defense. Yeah, I'm sure Russ isn't wanting to go and tear it up in week one in Seattle there.
No, definitely
not. But he's had so much success, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to do. I think also what's important to remember, he was elite the first 4 or 5 weeks before he had that finger injury. I mean, you go back and look at his film, you look at his stats, he was one of the best quarterbacks easily, top 2, top 3 in the first couple weeks. And then he had that weird finger injury, and it's pretty hard to throw footballs when your finger is messed up. And then he came back maybe too soon and whatnot. So I think people are even looking at last year and saying, oh, he's falling off, things like this. But I mean, we saw him last year be really good. So I'm very excited. I think the Broncos will bring pretty much this exact style of offense to Denver because they do play in Denver. I think that's what Hackett's going to do. And I think the Broncos are going to be a really, really good offense and a really good team.
Excellent. And just with the also in that video you mentioned, sorry, about when it comes to later on in the year and we comes up against, you know, maybe not just elite defenses, but very, very good defenses. In a division that's as stacked as the AFC West is, with you know, the moves that the Chargers have made on defense, the same with the Raiders, and of course the Chiefs too, that a lot of the time Russ, a lot of the games, well, at least like 8 games a year now, or sorry, 6 games a year. Sorry, my apologies. 6 games a year. He's coming up against really, really good defenses. Is there a concern there that, like you mentioned, with Russ's tendency to want to throw the moon ball, which obviously there's no one in the NFL that probably throws a better sort of moon ball than that, and like you're saying, his reluctance to find the middle of the field and to sort of, you know, keep the chains going. Is there a chance that, you know, that the offense could stall when it comes to maybe the second half of the season?
Yeah, I think, well, if looking at the division, I think the Chargers are definitely a defense that's up and coming. They struggled in a lot of ways last year, but just with the talent they have and in Staley's second year, they do project to be really good. I wouldn't really worry about the Chiefs defense, and the Raiders defense is going to be, they've just been below average for a long time, and I don't see them having the pieces to necessarily make a big jump in any way. So in terms of in the division, I'm not too worried, but I think what's important to note is last year there was a huge cultural shift in NFL defenses where, very generally speaking, the NFL went from a one high safety defense, so that's predominantly cover one, cover three, and transitioned to more two high safeties, cover two zone, cover two man, cover four quarters, etc. And what's interesting about that is we've never really seen Russ exist in the league when two high safeties were the predominant style of defense. Right around during the Legion of Boom, 2012, 2013, when he came in, everybody started copying the Legion of Boom, started playing pretty much predominantly one high or cover three zone. And why that's important for the style that Russ plays is, as you mentioned, Dara, he loves throwing the moon ball. Predominantly, that's the outside moon balls. So pretty much the one-on-one routes outside. And as I just said with the heat maps, he throws a lot of them. And what's challenging with that is with a second high safety, now each of those defenders have one half of the field. So if he's facing cover one man, there's just one high safety in the middle. It's pretty easy for him to throw a fade outside to DK because that one high safety can't necessarily bust his ass all the way over to the sideline and get there. So historically, when Russ does face two high defenses, I'm sure you remember last year during COVID, or I guess 2 years ago, against the Rams in that wild card rounds, there was a lot of struggles, and Staley was kind of the guy who brought in the two high style of defense, kind of copied off Vic Fangio, but really made his defensive philosophy. That was really what his defense was all about, where Fangio mixes it up a little bit more. So I think it'll be really interesting to see Russ over an entire year try and figure out these two high defenses when he doesn't have that option to say, okay, there's one high safety in the dead middle. I have Cortland Sutton over to the right. He's one-on-one. I know he's going to be one-on-one because that safety can't get over there. I'm just going to be the best freaking deep ball thrower in the league and hit him down the sideline. That option gets taken away much more often before the snap and after the snap with these two high safeties. So I think Russ is still a very, very good quarterback, but I'm very curious to see if he struggles a little bit more statistically, if he doesn't have necessarily as big of a blow up year, because he's still trying to figure out those two high defenses and they're kind of taking his go-to away, if you will. But when defenses play two high safeties and take that second safety out of the box and put him deep, that takes one man out of the box and makes it more advantageous for the run, which is why Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon are so important. So that's kind of the give and take that I love in football, where, okay, we want to stack somebody over here and make this part of our defensive strength. Well, that means we're taking this part of our defense away and making it a weakness. So that's what I think will be fascinating. But I do worry a little bit about how well Russ will adapt to this new-ish style of defense.
Well, moving on from, you know, the biggest quarterback move of the season to probably one of the biggest quarterback deals of the off season, and that's of course Kyler Murray. And uh, Murray has taken a step forward each year he's been in the NFL, and he's obviously topped it off by getting the Cardinals to the playoffs last season, albeit losing first go against the eventual Super Bowl champion Rams. It feels, although the progression is there, you can see it in the stats, and you alluded to it in your video as well. It feels as though there's still something off when it comes to Murray, and if it's the second half of the season collapses, which is obviously well documented as well, and obviously with this new deal, it kind of feels like it's a deal that the Cardinals had to make out of fear of being left behind if they let Murray go. But Alex, what about Kyler's game do you, well, first of all, like, and then secondly have some concerns over, especially now that he's after signing this a long extension with the team?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to watch Kyler. I actually did this Kyler video first, and then I did the Russ video, and stylistically, they're extremely similar. Kyler, even more so though. Kyler is kind of the heightened in every category version of Russ, where the Cardinals offense is very regimented, where Cliff basically he doesn't really move his receivers around. He's going to have DeAndre Hopkins to the left, AJ Green to the right. They got Rondale Moore, who got injured, but he was the slot guy. Christian Kirk was the slot guy. Those are going to be their guys in their positions. And then they're going to run screen passes. They're going to run hitches outside, and they're going to run fades or goes outside as well, or alert routes, which basically just means if we see a one-on-one, we're going to throw it. So it's very interesting watching them because they kind of only do a couple things in the passing game where there's not necessarily a lot of different elements they're mixing in. But Kyler is such an unbelievable talent that in a lot of ways he makes it work. I think, in my opinion, I think he has one of the strongest arms in the league, and I don't think that really gets talked about. But when he's throwing those one-on-ones outside, those deep fades to Green or to D Hop, those are unbelievable throws. I mean, the not just the distance, but the velocity on them, the way he paces them. I don't think he's necessarily as good as Russ, who can really get that really nice style of ball where it really drops in from almost the sky and just lands right in that bread basket. But Kyler is a very, very talented thrower. I think that his ability with his legs is incredible. Obviously, if you just watch him, it's not hard to see. That is a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams. And what he can do with his legs adds a whole nother element to the Cardinals offense where you need to prepare for it. And watching defenses, it doesn't really matter a lot of the times because he's that talented. This is a very ISO team, almost like basketball, where they are going to have their guys in those different positions, or those same positions, excuse me. And it's a very vertical and then horizontal offense where they're going to try and throw deep outside, and that's the vertical element. And then they're going to throw those screens, and there's just not a lot of in between. There's not a lot of Kyler is another guy very similar to Russ. He will not throw over the middle. Similar, exactly like Russ, their whole center of the field is just blue. It's insane. He does have struggle seeing over the middle of the field. He has trouble seeing linebackers where they are. He's not comfortable throwing in breakers, throwing dig routes, and that's a problem. I think after watching him and watching Russ's feet are so quiet in the pocket. He takes his drop. He's surveying around the field. Kyler has the loudest footwork of any quarterback in the league. It is an absolute mess. He struggles so much to stay in structure and play within the timing of the concepts. And we see that play out. There are these spike weeks, and then there are these big fall off weeks, like we saw in the playoffs, where if he's not in the rhythm that is necessary for this offense to play in, he's going to really struggle. He already isn't playing over the middle of the field. They're very regimented in what they do, where if you are able to take away those go routes, are able to take away those screen routes, there's just not a lot else they can turn to and really hang their hat on. I think that since they're so vertical outside, or they're so isolated outside, Kyler's only as good as the talent around him. And now that he's gotten paid, we're not going to see those guys be big name guys like they are right now. I think we have Hollywood, we have D-Hop, AJ Green's kind of declining. We have some really good pieces right now, but down the road, I'm just worried about how good they're going to be able to surround him, how good of a team they're going to be able to surround him with. And I think that when things go bad with Kyler, he's just going to take off and run. And from a down by down perspective in a game, that's usually a really good thing. He is arguably the most athletic, fastest person on the field anytime he's playing football. And if he can get to his second and third read, but sometimes if that first read isn't there, he's just going to run. He is absolutely petrified of getting hit. If he sees a free runner, instead of standing in there, holding the ball a tick longer, letting the receiver get down the field, he's going to fall on his ass on purpose, which I have never seen before in my life. A quarterback who says, I'm not going to, not only am I not going to bail out of this throw and kind of fade back and not take the entire brunt of the hit, I'm just going to sit my little butt down. And that's Kyler. He's not willing to play out the entire play, and will even, when you're taking away elements of playing the quarterback position, like seeing a free runner, seeing an extra guy coming and being willing to take that hit, that's an aspect of quarterback play that you're just taking off Kyler's plate and saying, okay, he can't do this. And I think that's kind of the issue with his game, where there are these little things that just aren't available to him, where he can't throw over the middle. He can't get to his second, third, fourth read consistently. He can do it. And he's not willing to take the big hit, which is challenging. I'm sitting in my studio right now taking 0 hits. So I'm not saying I would necessarily either. But when we remove these different parts of the quarterback position, I think that's where we suddenly see this bomb of a game, where that playoff game against the Rams was a nightmare. And I'm worried about the ceiling of this offense with Kyler, and that sort of game when they play a defense that's really good and knows how to keep him in the pocket and not let him run. I'm worried that those games are going to continue when we get into January and we're not playing the Jaguars or the Browns or something. That when we play these legit defenses, does Kyler have what it takes to stand in there and make that throw and sit in the pocket and read things out and throw over the middle? I don't think so.
Yeah, and the comparisons to Russ are obviously just, and one comparison that I do see as well with him is he's had to play behind a, you could say, limited or quite average offensive line at times as well during his time with the Cardinals. And with this extension too, and like you're saying, like they won't be able to get the big talent in that they were able to get when he was on his rookie contract. It looks as though that maybe not as much money is going to be able to be allocated to the offensive line as maybe as they once previously were able to, which means that maybe we might end up seeing a lot more of, like you're saying, Kyler running for his life and not being able to spend or not being able to spend too much time in the pocket.
Yeah, and I think it's really challenging because usually with Kyler, I mean, his first half splits versus second half splits are drastic. And I think we've seen him get banged up. I'm pretty sure every year he's missed a little bit of time. And in those first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season, when he could run around as much as he want, when his arm is healthy, he makes unbelievable plays. I know against the Browns, he was just destroying them. He had a game against the Vikings. He makes unbelievable plays. And it's so tricky because, like I said, on a down by down basis, he's incredible. And if these plays are gaining you big yardage and you're picking up 15 or 20 because Kyler rolls out and runs 20 yards down the field, it's challenging to have him come back to the field and be like, hey, man, by the way, you should have stayed in the pocket and taken a hit, but then we would have gotten 40 yards. How do you coach him to be better? It's very challenging. I don't think it's necessarily black and white where just say, okay, Kyler, you need to do this better. But I think that this will be an issue going forward where over time, Kyler's not going to develop into that elite quarterback that maybe he has the tools to potentially be, because he's kind of, the way I kind of see it, he's like a little kid in his development where he's almost not taking real reps, because when a guy comes and he just rolls out of the pocket and runs for first down, he's not processing that in a way like a true quarterback. The result is very good, don't get me wrong, and it's ideal to have that style of quarterback, but it's almost like if your dad is doing your homework for you so you don't fail, where whenever he needs to, he can just use his legs all of a sudden and not really take a real rep. So I think it's very difficult because he is so unbelievably gifted where he can just make that play whenever he wants. But when a team knows how to corral him in the pocket just a little bit more, and it comes down to a big 3rd and 9 in a playoff game, I don't think he'll have the answers in the future unless something changes pretty drastically.
Very good. I like the we'll call it a Freudian slip there about someone else doing his homework now with his new clause in his contract. We'll call it that.
Yeah,
Or
man.
should I say not in his contract, because they took it out actually, didn't they, in the end?
Yeah, so
Um,
nobody's allowed to clown him anymore because the contract the clause is out, right?
of
So
course, yes, he can
yeah,
go back to not doing his homework for 4 hours a
yeah,
week.
just hitting the sticks, man.
Man. Listen, Alex, we could talk all night long, and I could keep you here for hours and hours talking about it. So, but I'm only going to ask about one more player, before we let you go, and it's actually one of the players that is coming into the league this year from the draft, and that is Aiden Hutchinson, who was number one on a lot of people's drafts draft board. Sorry, but the Jaguars decided not to take him first overall. Of course, going for Trayvon Walker instead. And you put up a video with some concerns you had about his game, and I'd like to go into detail about some of those concerns that maybe possibly scared the Jaguars off picking him number one overall.
Yeah, yeah. It was a difficult decision, I think, for the Jaguars. I think with Trayvon, we didn't necessarily see all the production, but he played a very different position in Georgia's defense where he isn't going to get a lot of production. He was more snugged in a little closer inside, so more of a guard, whereas Aiden Hutchinson gets to play outside of the tackle and more space, kind of has a more defined role where he's just basically rushing up the field and trying to hit the quarterback on basically every play. And if you look at his alignments in college, he was in the B gap next in between the guard and tackle on just 4 snaps. He was over the tackle outside on just 20, and then he was outside that tackle on 763 snaps. So it's pretty clear what Michigan's role was for him, and that was being pretty far outside, playing in a ton of space. So I think maybe the Jaguars had a little bit of a holdup of maybe they didn't want they had a more defined role for what they wanted either Walker or Hutchinson to be, and felt that Walker could play that role a little bit better. I think with some of the too high stuff we've talked about, that kind of changes the alignments up front and changes the positions a little bit. Hutchinson has modeled his game basically after the Bosas, and more specifically Nick Bosa, because they both weigh about 265. And when I say that, I'm referring to his. Well, first of all, I'll talk about what kind of alignment Bosa plays in, and then we'll get into kind of stylistically how they're similar as players. In San Francisco's scheme, they play predominantly 4 down defensive linemen, and they ask their linemen to get way, way, way outside the tackles in what's called wide 9 alignments. And so that even means if there's a tight end on the line next to a right tackle, Bosa is going to line up outside of that tight end. So they're way, way, way out there. And Bosa is a really good player. He could play more inside as well. But what that allows him to do is, as I said, just play in a ton of space and really get to use speed if he wants to kind of set up these right tackles who are bigger and slower and whatnot. And that's the kind of role that I think Hutchinson will excel in. The issue is that with these alignments changing and more too high defenses, we're just not seeing that same wide 9 style nearly as much as we have in the last few years. So I think it'll be interesting with Detroit to try and figure out. Detroit played a ton of too high defense last year, ton of too high coverages, and it just doesn't really make sense to allocate your defensive lineman in that same way as you would in a 1 high style defense. So I'm a little nervous about how they're going to deploy him in that sense. Maybe they'll make him more of an outside linebacker and ask him to drop into coverage a little bit more, which he's a freak of a freaking athlete, so he wouldn't necessarily struggle in that way. But that was just a little holdup I had with trying to think of how he's going to fit into the NFL in this sense. Why
Yeah.
he's similar to Bosa stylistically is I really love the Bosa's game. They learned their system of moves, if you will, from Larry Johnson, who's an Ohio State defensive line coach, who is legendary. He's coached up plenty of great defensive linemen. And basically they have this package of moves that just plays off what the offensive lineman is going to do in a way that not a lot of defensive linemen have, certainly coming into the NFL. It's predominantly they use their side scissors moves, side scissor moves. Yeah, it is what it is. If you know the name, then it's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
But they use this side scissor move to, let's try and picture, if you're a right tackle and there's a guy outside of you, if Bosa's to your right, Bosa's going to try and go outside or inside, and when the tackle puts his arms out, he's going to try and use both his hands to swipe them away. So when a lineman or an offensive tackle tries to contact him, Bosa's just going to swipe that away. When the lineman says, okay, when the tackle says, okay, I'm just going to keep my hands low so you can't hit them, Bosa is going to bull rush him because now his chest is exposed. Then when the lineman says, okay, you're going to bull rush me, side scissor me, I'm going to keep my hands up high so you can't bull rush me. Bosa uses what's called a forklift technique, tries to grab his wrist and just raise them in the air and walk them back. So it was pretty striking watching Hutchinson because he does literally this exact package of moves. So it's a challenging repertoire to master. He was really good at it. I kind of, in the same way that Nick Bosa had some questions coming out about his power, I think those are there with Hutchinson, and that's why I had a little bit of a holdup with him. He's unbelievable athletically, and he tested through the roof. I think he was like a 97% athletic score of all time. It's just the power. I think that's where I worry a little bit when he does need to use that bull rush. That's where I had some questions and where I wasn't overly unbelievably excited about him as number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. Well, listen, Alex, it's been fantastic to speak to you this evening. Really gotten a great insight into a lot of topics. We'd love to have you back on the show to talk about a few more topics when we have more time to chat. But before we do let you go, for people interested, where are they able to check out your videos, or if they want to follow you on any of the socials?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere at Alex Rollins NFL, just my name and then NFL. I'm on Twitter, I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and I make a video every single Saturday. They come out about 8 a.m. Pacific time, which I know is, what is that, like 10 p.m. your time or something? Who even knows? It's like
Off the
midnight
top
for
of
you
my head,
guys. No, it's
oh
like
no,
5. It's like 3 or
it'd be
4 or
like
something p.m.,
4
right?
o'clock in the afternoon or something.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I do every week. I choose a topic and I try and get really, really in depth and kind of simplify these kind of crazy terms that we hear on broadcasts or online, and just make things simple and easy to digest, and hopefully create a bridge between how intimidating it is to hear all these NFL play names and things like that, and make it really palatable. So every Saturday, that's where I am, and come find me.
Excellent. Like I said at the start, a really big fan of your channel. Really enjoy the videos that you make and the breakdowns that you do, and really looking forward to seeing more of them definitely over the season for sure. And I hope you continue up the good work and all the success in the future.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, I would love to come back on. I know both of us are itching for some actual football action. So I appreciate the kind words, and I would love to come back and chop it up when the Seahawks are 13-0.
Absolutely, absolutely. That sounds like a treat, and I'm definitely going to take you up on that offer for sure. But this is where we're going to end this edition of the show. Once again, thank you to our guest for this evening, Alex Rollins. Make sure you follow him on all the socials he mentioned there, and just search for his name on YouTube. You'll find his channel there, and make sure you subscribe to it there too. Every Saturday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, about 4 p.m. Irish time, a new video is released, so you can check it out there, and of course go through his back catalog to see his other ones too. Like I said, that's all the time we have for this week. We'll be back again with a new show next week, but until then, stay safe and we'll see you soon.